All right, Dr. Andrew Von Plitt here again for another live Q&A session. Just going over some comments that people have left on videos, answering some questions, and wrapping things up probably pretty quickly again tonight. I have plenty to keep me busy this evening, so I'm going to try to keep this pretty short. So, first comments that I'm going to address are from a user named Tony Rodriguez. On my Taiji 24 series, first two videos, the first one he basically expresses that he's had difficulty with some other instruction videos online. And the second comment, he says that he's feeling very confident about the instruction method in the 24 form videos. So I'm very happy to hear that you're feeling confident about the instruction method in those videos. And I hope that they are exactly what you're looking for as you move forward with learning that form. So thank you for the comment, Tony. And the questions that I was wanting to get to this evening are from a user named Brian Ross. And he left two different questions on two different videos, but they're basically asking the same thing. So the first one, he says, silk reeling and standing exercise, how do you fit them into normal Taiji training? And then the second one, he says, when practicing Tai Chi, what's the best way to incorporate silk reeling and Qigong exercises with Tai Chi? So basically the same thing, just worded a couple different ways. And so that's what I want to cover in this video, is how you incorporate those things with your Taiji training. So where to start with this? In the way that I learned Tai Chi, these were already incorporated into the training. So it's not something that I have had to try to come up with a method of incorporating it. It's just something that has been a part of the training. So as far as I can tell with this question, what you're saying is right now what you're doing is practicing Taiji forms, and you're also wanting to add Standing Post Qigong. You're also wanting to add silk reeling exercises to that, and you're wondering the best way to do that. So I'm going to approach this a couple different ways. The first is in what order you should do it. So this can depend on a couple different things. If you are training in the morning, say, a really good way of training in the morning is to start with the least physically active exercise and move toward the most physically active exercise. So what you could do in the morning training, since you're starting from a very physically inactive state of sleeping, is to start with your standing post qigong. So that's the first thing that you do. You do that for a certain amount of time. Now, the amount of time that you do that kind of depends on what time you have available and kind of your philosophy around training standing post qigong. There are instructors who are like, if you aren't doing it at least 30 minutes, you're wasting your time. There are other instructors that say it's more important to be consistent and the amount of time that you do it is not as important. I'm somewhere in between there. Um, if you, in the beginning, do not do it for a longer period of time each time you train, it's more difficult to get to the feeling of the structure that you're after and developing the internal environment that you're after when you're doing standing post qigong if you are not doing it for long enough periods. And part of that is because you don't give yourself enough time to like fatigue the muscles that are working that shouldn't be working while you're doing standing post qigong. So if you just do it for 5 minutes, some of your muscles may feel fatigued and you'll have to adjust a little bit to compensate and try to find the correct structure and alignment and internal energy sensation, the focus that you need to maintain that structure. But it's not the same as if you were standing there for 30 minutes. After 30 minutes, pretty much the muscles that are doing extra work are going to either be screaming or they will have given up at that point. So that's kind of the usefulness of going, one of the useful aspects of going for a longer period of time with your standing post qigong is it kind of takes you to the point where you have to have good structure and you have to have that good internal component to maintain your stance through that training. And if you don't do it for the extended period of time, then you don't really get that benefit. So that's one thing. If you don't have enough time to do a 30-minute session and do your, silk reeling exercise and do your Taiji training, to me, it's better to do a small amount every day than it is to do large amounts and then miss several days. So do what you can to get it done every day. And if that means like 2 or 3 days a week, you're doing standing post for a longer period of time. And then the other days of the week, you're doing it for like 5 minutes. That's better than either missing it completely on the days when you only have time to do it 5 minutes, or, just making yourself go crazy trying to make sure you do 30 minutes regardless of all the other activities or commitments that you have throughout the day. So I kind of went on a side trail there, but basically when you're doing your morning training, start with your standing post. So we talked a little bit about how long you can do it and the benefits of doing it longer versus shorter and more consistently. So beyond that, after you would do your standing post qigong, that's going to be kind of the initial building the awareness of the structure that you're going to maintain as you do the Tai Chi practice later. You move on to the silk reeling at that point. Now, this is good because it starts to warm things up. So it's a great, like, easy exercise in that it doesn't demand a lot of like physical strength. It doesn't demand a lot of quick movements or anything like that. Like you have the fajing movements and Chen style. Um, it's a great gentle way of like warming up the body and moving from the static frame structure that you get in the standing post qigong into sort of the maintaining that frame as you're doing motion, but then also incorporating the silk reeling aspects in that motion. So it serves as a good warm up, and it also helps to transition from the standing to the moving, and it starts to bring you into the place of paying attention to the silk reeling motion in the body. So that's the order that I would do it in the morning, at least. And then after you've done that, you can go to practice whichever form it is that you're practicing. Now, the important thing to remember is when you're practicing the form, you should both be practicing all of the components of standing post and all the components of silk reeling. So really, you're doing all three at once when you do form training. The problem is if you're doing form training and you aren't able to be completely aware of the structure and the alignment and the internal components that you would have when doing standing post, and the same as you would have when you're doing silk reeling, that's your indication that you need to be doing more standing post and more silk reeling, because those things should be completely incorporated into your form training and they should be 100% a part of what you're doing. And if they're not, you need to do more of those other things. Because the whole idea with standing post, the whole idea with silk reeling is that you are training, you're working on very like fundamental basic components of Tai Chi, and you're getting rid of all the distractions that come with doing a form. And typically when you do a form, you think, well, you should be, present, you should be mindful, all this stuff. But there's a lot going on when you do a form. You have to pay attention to where you're stepping, how far you're stepping, what step comes next, where your hands are moving, how they're moving in relation to what your feet are doing. Like all these things have to be integrated and done at the right time and with the right frame, the right structure, the right movement components. So when you're doing that, it can be very difficult if you haven't already got your foundation from standing post qigong to understand your frame, your structure, your internal components. If you haven't already, picked up the components of silk reeling that should be in the form, trying to incorporate those into your form too early in your training, it's just going to be confusing because you're still trying to figure out where your hands and feet go. So that's why when you go to standing post qigong or when you go to silk reeling exercises, it gets rid of all of those extra components that can be distracting. And it says, okay, right now we're working on structure, we're working on these aspects of like internal environment. Standing post, just like if nothing else, just structure. This is the structure that you should carry with you as you go through the form. Then you can go, okay, now it's time for silk reeling. And you would carry that same structure with you because that's the foundation of all of Tai Chi, really, is your standing post. And then you go on to the silk reeling and you focus on maintaining that structure and you focus on getting the spiral motions in the body that are supposed to be there when you do Tai Chi. And you can focus on those things very specifically in detail with less distractions. And then as you begin to notice those things when you're doing the Tai Chi training, that's when you can actually start to transition into doing more of form training and use that as part of your standing post type training and use that as part of your silk reeling type training because those components are already there. So you're aware of those things are still being developed while you're doing form training. So yes, that's if you're wondering how these things fit together, that's just kind of a rough overview of how they fit together: the standing post, the silk reeling, and the form training. Now, as I was saying before, it kind of depends on when you're training during the day as to what the order may be. As you're getting toward the end of the day, if you're doing your training in the evening, and this, there's many ways of training, but this is one thought process, is that you're going from an active part of the day where you're doing a lot of motion to a part of the day or the night really where you're not going to be moving, you're going to be sleeping, laying still. So you would kind of do things in reverse. So, pardon me, you would start with your form training and then you would go down to, and of course, you'd want to do a proper warm up. You could have a short exercise session of standing post, a short exercise session of silk reeling just to kind of warm up everything, get everything where it's like both mentally, physically, energetically where it's supposed to be for your form training. Then you're going to focus on your form training. And then the majority of your silk grilling training and your standing post that you do is going to be after the form training as you're winding the day down. So you do form, you do your warm up, do form, do silk grilling, and that's kind of bringing things down because you just did a form. Now you're coming down to very basic movements. Now you're bringing things down even further to a standing post Qigong exercise where there's not a lot of physical movement, the movement's internal, and things are kind of like coming down. Now, different people have different reactions to standing post Qigong. Some people will feel extremely energized afterwards, and some people will feel very tired afterwards. And depending on how you respond to standing post Qigong, that may not be the right order to do things for you. But in general, that's a good way of doing it. Is start with the most active thing, go to the least active thing. And you could even finish if you wanted to do standing post first and then finish with something that's very, very kind of calm and relaxing, do a seated meditation instead at the end instead of a standing post. But basically, active to less active, getting you ready for kind of winding the day down and going to bed. So that's some ways that you can structure how you're fitting these things into your training. I think that answers the question you were getting at, as how these things fit together: the standing exercise, the silk grilling, and the Taiji form training. So you do definitely want all of those things in your training. And like I was saying, when you're at the point where you've done enough standing posts, you've done enough silk grilling, you're going to see them very evident as you're practicing your form. And if you're not there, you're not seeing them evidently as you practice your form, you need to spend more time on those. So I think that answers your question. If not, let me know in the comments, and I will give it another shot at a future time in a future video. Um, Let me check real quick to see if there's any new comments. Anyone who's watching, if you have any questions, feel free to ask and I will be happy to answer them. Otherwise, I'm probably going to wind this up pretty quickly here. Let's see. I do not see. Wait for it to refresh. All right. So that looks like those are the questions. That's what I was wanting to cover today. I hope that was useful for you all. If you have any questions on what I said in this video, please put them in the comments below and I will get to them in a future video. I appreciate all of you and your enthusiasm in Tai Chi and Qigong, and I appreciate you watching these videos and supporting this channel. Thank you all for that. And I'm going to sign off. I wish you all the best. Have a wonderful evening. Stay safe and healthy, and I will see you next time.